Part 54. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 531. Xie Xiaofu turned around and sat down on the couch beside him, and said calmly, "Escaped. Escaped." Xie Jin raised his eyebrows slightly. "When did my father's people become so useless?" "Special people need special treatment," Xie Xiaofu said calmly. "Most of the people who attack you are dead warriors with high martial arts skills and good at using poison. It is normal that the people under my command cannot find out." Hearing this, Xie Jin's eyebrows showed deep thought. "So, I have to use people from Juxiao Pavilion to investigate. If you can't catch the assassin, you can't confirm the mastermind behind it." Chu Nanyi sat down in front of the bed again and said calmly, "Even if you have doubts in your heart, you can't convict someone without evidence. There is no need to convict him." Xie Jin's tone was deep, and the curve of his lips was a bit inexplicably dangerous. "Even if it is just because he provided me with an opportunity to use the torture trick, I will definitely let him live 2 more years. God, keep it and play it slowly until you have 1 breath left and then kill it." Chu Nanyi raised her eyes to look at him. "If Prince Yao had seen your expression and heard what you said at this moment, he would probably never believe that you are a weak patient who was injured and poisoned." "Being injured and poisoned doesn't stop me from speaking," Xie Jin said lazily. "At most, I can't use force." Chu Nanyi nodded in agreement. "It's really rare to have the nerve to be so righteous and confident when the boat capsizes in the gutter." Xie Jin looked at him lightly. "A mere bastard from the Chu family dares to speak like this in front of Master Ju. Do you really think that I am a sick cat?" The corner of Chu Nanyi's mouth twitched. "Don't forget that your life is still in the hands of a mere bastard. Do you believe that I will make a mistake and send you to see the Lord of Hell?" Although Xie Xiaofu knew his son's true nature, he felt relieved when he saw that he could still talk to others, got up and left. He still has many things to deal with, and he has no time to stay here and watch his son play tricks with others. "Seriously?" Chu Nanyi looked slightly serious. "Have you seriously thought about this? This is not a joke, nor is it a game for you to visit a brothel to find your whim. Prince Yao is a nobleman of the royal family, with a noble status and great power. Not to mention how many difficulties and obstacles you will face in the future. Even if you are successful, will you definitely be able to live together until you grow old? What if you regret it one day? Worldly perspectives and opinions may soon let you down. I regret today's decision. It's okay to have a temper like yours. You can start over when you're tired of it, but if Crown Prince Yao takes it seriously. In your mind, am I so unreliable?" Xie Jin glanced at him and said in a leisurely tone, "No matter how much I love to play, I would not approach Xian Yuan Yao just because of a whim and want to play a taboo game of cut sleeves. Love, which of the young men Her Majesty the Queen has given me is not more suitable than him?" Chu Nanyi said nothing. "I really want to be with him," Xie Jin said calmly. "It's a bit sensational to say we'll grow old together, but I can have such a person by my side for the rest of my life. I can fight side by side in the court, and in my spare time, I can drink and talk about tea and chess. I'm happy to be with him. It is enough for me to have someone to share my troubles with, and to look at the spring flowers and autumn moon without being alone." Chu Nanyi was silent for a moment. "It sounds really good." It was good. Xie Jin sighed. "I have been imagining this kind of scene during this time. Every time I think of it, I feel that it can give me more spiritual satisfaction than the beauty of soft jade. Compared with him, all the beauties in the world seem to be vulgar." Chu Nanyi was speechless for a moment. He couldn't understand this kind of feeling, but he could understand it if he regarded this kind of feeling as a pair of best friends spending the rest of their lives together. Isn't there a saying that says this? Brothers are like siblings, women are like clothes. Although this is inappropriate to say, it is true that not all men love beauties. For some men, brothers and confidants are worth cherishing more than beauties. He guessed that Xie Jin might regard Xian Yuan Yao as a brother and confidant, rather than the so-called Duan sleeve love. After all, as he said himself, if he really wanted to play duin sleeve, there would be those who are more beautiful than women. A teenager is obviously more suitable. No matter what thoughts you have, you'd better think it over carefully. Chu Nanyi took the silver needle from his hand and wiped the blood on his finger with a handkerchief. The king of Waynan is such a son, you have to do a good job. Mental preparation. Xiejin said nothing, frowning slightly, not knowing what he was thinking. After Chu Nanyi took out the silver needle and packed her things, it was already 3 o'clock when she left Xie's house. The sun was shining high and it was another bright and good weather. After returning home, Chu Nanyi saw Xian Yuanqi walking out as soon as he stepped through the door. Prince Qi, Chu Nanyi looked at him in surprise. Is something wrong? Xian Yuan prayed and said, I want to talk to my father-in-law about something. As he said that, his eyes fell on the medicine box in Chu Nanyi's hand, and he raised his eyebrows and said, Did you go to Xie's house? Chu Nanyi nodded. Although Xiejin was only injured in the assassination of his arm, the poisoning is a big deal. Xian Yuanqi smiled lightly. It seems that your medical skills are far more than just a superficial knowledge. Chu Nanyi smiled gracefully. Didn't Prince Qi already know this? What happened to Qian Lanyi before? Xian Yuanqi took the medicine from him, so he couldn't have forgotten it. Xian Yuanqi was silent for a moment. Juxiao Pavilion is well informed. Can you tell me when the regent and Her Majesty the Queen will return? What's wrong? Chu Nanyi was confused. What's wrong with you? Xian Yuanqi sighed depressedly. It's really uncomfortable to be alone in an empty room. Chu Nanyi's expression suddenly became subtle. What did he think was going on? It turned out to be because of this. If someone else's wife can be used by Her Majesty the Queen and the Prince Regent in such important ways, she will feel particularly honored. Chu Nanyi frowned. Not everyone has the opportunity and honor to personally take care of the young prince. You actually dissatisfied with being separated for such a short period of time? Xian Yuanqi was silent for a moment. I suggest you get married as soon as possible and have children. It is best to marry someone who is more powerful, someone who can be reused by the regent and Her Majesty the Queen. In the future, you can rely on your holy favor to reach the top. Maybe even Xiejin will not be your opponent. Chu Nanyi sneered. Do you think every woman in the world can be as powerful as my sister? Strong girls can only be found but not sought after. Not everyone is Chu Hongyi. Hongyi is indeed very powerful. Xian Yuan prayed with pride, but her power is not innate. You can find a younger girl and put some effort into training her to be more powerful, right? Chu Nanyi thought for a while. As a concubine, I think it's better to keep the status quo. Being too pushy is not necessarily a good thing. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 532. Should a concubine keep a low profile? This is not necessarily the case. Xian Yuanqi thought of his younger brother and smiled lightly. Ahua and Akan have been very proud of themselves recently. They have learned a lot and have successfully entered the official career path. They will be bright and glorious in the future. Chu Nanyi raised his eyebrows. Will Prince Qi be dissatisfied? Dissatisfied? Xian Yuanqi chuckled. I look so small-minded? Ahua and Akan were able to be reused by the regent because of their outstanding talents, good looks, and their own hard work. Why should I be dissatisfied? Is it possible that they have to be suppressed to the point where they cannot lift their heads in order to demonstrate the unsurpassable status of the legitimate son? Prince Qi is willing to watch my brother show off in front of others. This is because Prince Qi is generous. As an elder brother, he is also friendly and tolerant towards his younger brother. Chu Nanyi said warmly. However, Ahua is certainly lucky, but Ah Chenkan, the reason for his rise to prominence is his father and brother's loss of power. If King Wei and Xian Yuanyan are still the same as before, then no matter how talented and good-looking Ah Chen is, he will never have a chance to stand out in this life. Because there is Xian Yuanyan on it, Xian Yuanchen will live humbly in dust all his life. Xian Yuanqi silently thought about the meaning of his words. Are you actually trying to say that the reason why Ahua and Ah Chen can be so bright and glorious is because they met the Lord of Light? Being outstanding in talent and conduct is one, and meeting the master is the other. Chu Nanyi smiled lightly, both of them are indispensable. Xian Yuanqi nodded and agreed with him, so it doesn't really matter whether I, a bastard, can achieve great glory. What matters is that I know what I want, what I should do, and what kind of life I will have in the future. Chu Nanyi smiled gently, I'm different from Ah Chen and Ahua. Xian Yuanqi nodded when he heard the words. That's right. Chu Nanyi, the bastard, lives a much more carefree and comfortable life than Ah Chen and Ahua, so he doesn't need to prove himself through fame. He obviously has no intention of developing an official career. The so-called bastard should keep a low profile is just that. It is to hide the unknown identity. Xian Yuanqi calmly ended the topic, go and do your work, I want to go to the palace. Chu Nanyi nodded, and the two separated. The regent and Her Majesty the Queen were not in the palace. Xian Yuan prayed that it would be inconvenient for a foreign minister to go to the Dajhan Palace, so he asked Commander Yang of the Imperial Army to send a message to the eldest princess. Commander Yang is responsible for the defense of the palace guards and can go anywhere within his duties. Moreover, Xian Yuanqi only asked him to pass on the message and did nothing else. Naturally, he simply agreed. Reporting the words to the eldest princess, Xian Yuan heard a burst of joking on his face. Sure enough, we are newlyweds, and it is the time when we are inseparable. She smiled lightly, we have only been apart for a few days, and you can't help but miss your beloved wife and children. Chu Hong'ai was calm, he doesn't know how to be reserved. Xian Yuan almost laughed when he heard this. Don't know how to be reserved? This makes sense, it seems that this couple doesn't quite understand what reserve is, and their love is clearly shown in their eyes and words. The same goes for Rong Yu and Nan 11. Not only do they love each other openly and honestly, they even have a desire to show their love. The attitude of telling the world. It's been a long time since the Dongling royal family welcomed such a seed of infatuation, and each one is more jealous than the last. When you go back in the afternoon, you can stay in the palace for one night. Xian Yuan said, a farewell is better than a wedding. I will take care of the children for you, and no one will disturb the mood of you young couple. Chu Hong'ai said, I'll be back soon. After lunch in the palace, Chu Hong'ai and Xian Yuan put the two children to sleep, and arranged for Yin Yuyan's Huang to take precautions. Unless it was an emergency, no unrelated people were allowed to enter the Dajhan Palace. Then Chu Hong'ai went out. The palace. A carriage stopped outside the palace gate. The carriage of Prince Jing's mansion. Chu Hong'ai paused for a moment, then walked towards the carriage without saying a word. The car curtain was opened, revealing Xian Yuanqi's flower-like face. The corners of his lips were curved with longing and a bit of resentment. As soon as Chu Hong'ai entered the carriage, he pulled her into his arms. Then there was a warm and soft touch on his lips. Chu Hong'ai didn't move, letting him do whatever he wanted. Xian Yuanqi's movements were not in line with his beautiful and handsome appearance at all. He was so fierce that he wanted to eat Chu Hong'ai alive. Chu Hong'ai's lips were numb from his kiss, and she even felt a slight pain. The kiss left her almost breathless. It shows how deeply he misses her. With her hands around his neck, Chu Hong'ai was imprisoned in his arms, unable to move, until Xian Yuanqi's low and slightly bewitching voice came to her ears, daughter-in-law, does this count as an affair for us? Chu Hong'ai took a moment to come back to her senses, feeling her numb lips, forget it. Xian Yuanqi bit her ear dissatisfied, you don't miss me at all. I want to. Chu Hong'ai said, I really want to. Xian Yuanqi was suspicious, really? Then why don't you take the initiative to come out of the palace to see me? Chu Hong'ai sat up and slowly raised her eyes to look at him. Her Royal Highness the Princess said you are not reserved. Xian Yuanqi's expression paused, and then the corner of his mouth twitched. Can being reserved be enough? Chu Hong'ai said nothing. When the queen's cousin comes back, we must make some compensation from her. Xian Yuanqi was dissatisfied. We help her coax the children and let them go out and live freely. This is so unfair. Chu Hong'ai was silent for a moment. I am coaxing the child, it has nothing to do with you. Xian Yuanqi raised his eyebrows. And I'm pregnant with our son, and His Royal Highness the Crown Prince is being taken care of by the Princess. Chu Hong'ai continued to correct, I just moved to Dajhan Palace to live temporarily. Xian Yuanqi glanced at her sideways, is my wife turning her elbow outward? She has only lived in Dajhan Palace for a few days, and she has lost sight of him. Could it be that someone is giving her a drug? Chu Hong'ai was just telling the truth. But the truth did not prevent her from missing her husband, so she held his face and kissed him, and said in a light voice, do you want to continue to charge here, or go back to the mansion to fight a few rounds? Xian Yuanqi was instantly extinguished by her kiss, and said without hesitation, go back to the mansion. The best place for a reunited couple to date is the bedroom, and the best way to date is to have sex. Sweat profusely and have an extreme exercise, which can definitely expel all the resentment and dissatisfaction in the internal organs. The sun is still bright afternoon, and it is still early. Take your time, don't rush. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 533. King Yun's enthronement ceremony was very grand. Although the time was a little rushed, with the regent personally in charge, the Ministry of Rites did not dare to neglect. After choosing an auspicious day, all the processes progressed very quickly. On the 8th day of November, the coronation ceremony was held as scheduled. All the royal family, old princes, young princes, princes, and civil and military officials from all dynasties came to the palace to witness the new emperor's enthronement, and paid homage after the ceremony. Prince Ning, Prince Rui, and Prince Qi, who have never given up, must accept this fact even if they are unwilling to do so, and kneel respectfully as courtiers at the enthronement ceremony of Prince Yun. The crisp autumn weather has passed, and November is approaching the depth of winter again. Nan 11 has put on a few thick clothes, and spends most of her time in the Prince Regent's mansion to spend her days quietly. Occasionally, she invites a few noble ladies from aristocratic families to have tea together, enjoy flowers, and ponder. Let's choose some suitable concubines for King Yun. However, regarding the draft issue after King Yun ascended the throne, Shi and Rong Yu only gave suggestions. The choice was his own. Rong Yu said that he would not interfere if he did not interfere. As for what to do in the future, it was up to King Yun himself. King Yun is not a fool. After he ascended the throne, he became the real new master of Zhou dynasty. He had to make his own decisions in everything. Lin Jie has been temporarily staying at the regent's mansion for the past 2 days because he had a bit of a fuss with the Huo family about He Li. Although he finally got his wish, Lin Jie had turned against his mother and became enemies with the Huo family. After so many days of trouble, she was exhausted both physically and mentally and just wanted to rest for a while. Fortunately, Nan 11 gave her some help at the critical moment and let her live in the regent's mansion. The Huo family and the eldest princess did not dare to come to the regent's mansion to make trouble. People outside were talking about it and did not dare to spread the word to the regent's mansion. In the palace, she could have some peace and quiet for a few days. There is just a problem that I have to face. Eldest princess, you are the only daughter. If you leave Dazhu, she will become completely alone. Nan 11 talked about this while drinking tea with Lin Jie in the afternoon. Although I think you should leave this place of right and wrong, but the decision still lies with you. If you can't let her go, the matter needs to be discussed again. Linjia's attitude towards this issue is very clear. She doesn't regard me as her daughter, and I don't think I have any mother-daughter relationship with her. Besides, my surname is Lin, and the Lin family, including my father, are all named after her death. For such a woman who was ruthless to her husband and cruel and exploitative of her daughter, it was her own choice to become a loner. Hearing this, Nan 11 smiled casually. In a sense, we are really similar. You and your mother have no relationship, and neither do my father and I in the end. We are all blood relatives who have become strangers. Linjia was silent for a moment, sighed and smiled. I am much worse than my great-uncle. In fact, it's really not that bad. Nan 11 secretly thought that she just had a strong maternal background and the blood of the Dongling royal family, and now she has become the queen of Dongling. However, if we dig deeper, she can become the queen only because of Dongling's fate that happens once every 200 years, and because of her relationship with Dongling. Rongyu has a fate in his past life and this life. Otherwise, based on her life experience, her situation might be similar to Lin Xia's. But none of this matters, and there is no need to argue. After taking a sip of tea, she said, if you have thought about it, come with me to Tangling. The place is unfamiliar and you can start a new life again. Lin Jia thought for a moment, I don't know anything, and I don't have any talents that I can show off. I can simply go to the palace and become a female official. I will be responsible for serving my great-uncle for the rest of my life. Is this okay? How can this be done? Nan 11 laughed. There is no shortage of you as a female official in the palace. When I get to Dongling, I will say that you are my sister. The outstanding men who are keeping Dongling can't wait to marry you. Marriage is not a big deal at all. Don't worry, why spend your whole life alone? Lin Jia said nothing. Although this marriage in the Huo family did not make her disappointed with men, it did make her feel tired of coping. She felt that it was good to be alone. There were many female officials in the palace who were willing to serve noble people all their lives without leaving the palace to marry. Didn't you come here too? You can take your time when it comes to marriage, don't be in a hurry, Nan 11 said. Whether it is in Dazhu or Dongling, there is no shortage of dandies like the Huo family, but most men are still reliable, and there is no need to give up eating because of choking. Lin Jia hummed and nodded slowly. Maybe give it a try. She has been completely disappointed with her relatives in Dazhu. All she has left here is pain and numbness. There is really nothing to miss. There is nothing wrong with starting over in a different environment. As for marriage, let it happen naturally, don't reject it or force it. After the new emperor's enthronement ceremony, Rongyu took some time off. When he returned to the palace in the evening, he saw Lin Jia and Nan 11 having tea and chatting. He did not interrupt and went directly to the study. After King Yun ascends the throne, all the capable ministers and generals who originally belonged to Rongyu will change their allegiance to the new emperor. After all, their roots are in the great Zhou dynasty and they cannot follow Rongyu to Dongling. King Yun is the king who was supported by Rongyu. They should also be loyal to the new emperor. This can be regarded as Rongyu's enthronement gift to King Yun. At dinner time, Lin Jia wisely stood up and left. Even though Nan 11 asked her to have dinner with her, she was very sensible and did not stay to disturb her. She only went to the yard where she was staying alone, letting the maid beside her accompany her. Have dinner. She knew how possessive and jealous the regent was. No matter now or in the future, whenever the regent was free, it would be best for other people to leave, so that the couple could have absolutely quiet space to be alone. So there were only Nan 11 and Rongyu for dinner. Is everything arranged? Nan 11 put a piece of crispy chicken into Rongyu's mouth. When are we going back? Rongyu replied while eating, don't worry, leave after the Chinese New Year. Nan 11 hummed. It was November now, and the Chinese New Year was less than 2 months away. After the Chinese New Year, it would be spring and flowers would bloom, so it would be more comfortable to travel. Are you going to take Lin Jia with you to Dongling? I'm just giving her advice. The final decision is up to her. Nan 11 smiled lightly, but she does want to leave this place, so if nothing unexpected happens, she should follow us to Dongling. Rong Yu hummed, Chu Nanyi and Mo Lingan are not married yet, Xian Yuan Chen and Xian Yuan Hua are also of marriageable age. When the time comes, we can see if there is a good match and maybe arrange a marriage. Nan 11 smiled, you are willing to give up these good men under your command. Rong Yu sighed, 11er is willing to take her back, so I must worry about the marriage. Instead of finding her an unreliable one, I am naturally more willing to contribute the reliable people under my command. Otherwise, if another pair of resentful couples are formed, it will be Nan 11 who will worry about cleaning up the aftermath. Rong Yu would rather she focus more on himself. You're right, Nan 11 nodded. I think so too. There are many reliable men in Dongling who know each other well. Linjia can have a better choice, but everything depends on her own willingness. We can only give some reference suggestions. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 534. The new emperor ascended the throne, and there were many complicated matters waiting to be dealt with. Rong Yu seemed to be at ease, but in fact there were still many trivial matters that he needed to make decisions about. King Yun, who had just ascended the throne, would send people to ask for his advice from time to time. Throughout the winter before the New Year's Day, Rong Yu spent time between the imperial palace and the palace. He dealt with court affairs during the day and returned to the palace to accompany Nan 11 in the evening. Time flies by quite quickly. During this period, Linjia never left the regent's palace. The eldest princess Rongshan sent people to visit her many times, but she was never able to get in. Linjia did not want to see anyone from the eldest princess's palace, so Nan 11 would naturally protect her. The Huo family also sent people to sue for peace several times, completely losing their original arrogant and domineering style. Because they knew that Linjia lived in the regent's palace and had a good relationship with the regent princess, they were worried that the regent princess would stand up for Linjia, with the regent's power. It is very easy to manage a Huo family. However, Linjia is not a person who wants to kill everyone. Anyway, she and Huo Yang have not yet become husband and wife. The marriage in name only for more than half a year is regarded as a disaster. Now that she has escaped, the past is in the past. She is relieved. Not to forgive others, but to let yourself go. Therefore, she did not respond or retaliate to the attitude of her mother and the Huo family, and just let everything pass with the wind. In addition, Nan Jiao also wanted to see Nan 11 more than once. If she couldn't do it herself, she asked someone to see her in other ways. However, due to Nan Mansion's long-lost status and Nan Jiao's faded status, she had long been favored by the imperial capital. Women are excluded from the circle, who can help her at this time. So until the Chinese New Year, she couldn't see Nan 11. There was a banquet in the palace on New Year's Eve, and Rong Yu and Nan 11 entered the palace together. This was their first real appearance on a formal occasion after returning to the Zhou dynasty with majesty and glory. All the ministers knelt down and paid homage. The new emperor was sitting on top wearing a dragon robe, and Rong Yu and Nan 11 were sitting on the second throne. Everyone in the civil and military circles knew that the regent was trying to support the new emperor, which also meant that the other three princes had to think about it even if they still had different intentions. Do you have enough courage to challenge the regent Yu Wei? Even if you leave the Zhou dynasty, Yu Wei is still there. The regent's cold-blooded killing methods over the years have been deeply rooted in the hearts of the people. It is not easy to overcome the fear in his heart in a short period of time. Moreover, after supporting the new emperor to ascend the throne, the regent's former loyal staff were left to the new emperor. The support and loyalty of those few confidants alone were enough to make King Yun's throne impregnable and unshakable. At this point, the dust has settled in the country of the great Zhou dynasty. Spring started early this year, and it snowed for 2 consecutive days at the end of November. Rongyu and Nan 11 stayed in the Nuan pavilion to avoid the cold and enjoy the snow. A maid from the palace built several snowmen in various shapes in the courtyard. Nan 11 sat in front of the window and watched them play, with a bit of a smile on her face. And Rongyu sat aside and looked at her quietly. His eyes seemed to be filled with tiny lights, and he was so full of happiness and pampering that he could hardly help but overflow. Time flies so fast. Spring began early this year, on the 16th day of the 12th lunar month. The weather got warmer in the days after the beginning of spring. By the end of the first lunar month, the sun was shining brightly for several consecutive days, and many flowers bloomed in the palace garden. Nan 11 missed Hauer and decided to take advantage of the warm days to return to Dongling. Rongyu naturally listened to her and accompanied Nan 11 to celebrate the Lantern Festival on the 15th day of the first lunar month in the Great Zhou dynasty. The two went to the Lantern Festival together and experienced the mood of a romantic tryst in the crowded market. On the 16th day of the first lunar month, his guards began to pack their bags. Rongyu and Nan 11 rested in the mansion for a day and set off to leave the imperial city of Zhou dynasty on the evening of the 16th day of the first lunar month. The situation where each dominates the world has officially returned. Xian Yuanyao arranged things in the military camp, and as Xiejin wished, he entered Jing Garden again that night. Xiejin was awake, half leaning on the bedside reading a book, with one hand resting on the edge of the bed, using only his uninjured right hand to turn over the book. Xian Yuanyao saw his bruised arm when he entered the room. "What's going on?" Xian Yuanyao stood in front of the bed, frowning and staring at the bruises on Xiejin's fair and lean arms. "Why don't you look pretty?" Xiejin raised his eyes faintly. "Not very beautiful." Xian Yuanyao nodded. "Yes, very ugly." "You came here just to taunt me." "Of course not." Xian Yuanyao turned around and looked around the room, and said calmly, "There are no maids or servants in your room. They took care of me for a day and let them go and rest." Xian Yuanyao said calmly, "I remember there is a word called rotation." "Aren't you on duty?" Xiejin raised the corners of his lips and smiled seductively. "I want to be alone with Yao Yao and don't want others to disturb me." Xian Yuanyao was silent and looked at him expressionlessly. Xiejin looked aggrieved. "Yao Yao is angry." Xian Yuanyao said, "How do you feel now?" "It's not that good." Xiejin's voice was slightly tired. "I feel so weak that I can't muster any energy." Xian Yuanyao. "These are all traces left by Chu Nanyi's acupuncture to detoxify." Xiejin pointed to the bruises on his arms and the tiny needle holes. "There are them on his fingers too." Xian Yuanyao followed his raised hand and saw the clear needle holes on his fingers, and frowned instantly. "Chu Nanyi's acupuncture skills are so bad." "It's just an acupuncture, leaving some pinholes is normal, but what's going on with these bruises?" "Well, it's really not good." Xiejin complained without changing his face. "If the imperial doctor in the palace wasn't proficient in this kind of poison, why would I need a quack doctor like him to take action?" Xian Yuanyao continued to remain expressionless. "Yao Yao." Xiejin raised his hand to him in vain. "Come here." Xian Yuanyao frowned and looked at him warily. "What are you doing? What can I do to you like this?" Xiejin looked unkind. "Are you so afraid of me?" "Afraid?" Xian Yuanyao has never been afraid of anyone except Rongyu in his life. "Are you a man-eating tiger?" he whispered. "Even if you are a tiger, it is just a sick tiger now. I can easily break your neck with one hand." Xiejin smiled so brightly that he said, "Brother Yao is mighty." Xian Yuanyao hated the cold and couldn't help but get goosebumps all over his body. "I haven't showered in several days and my body feels tight." Xian Yuanyao was not fooled and said in a calm voice, "The patient should rest more. You are weak now and are not suitable for bathing. We will wait until you recover." "But..." "No buts." Xian Yuanyao had a tough attitude. "I asked Chu Nanyi when I came here, and he said that you can't take a shower or get out of bed for the time being." "Have you asked Chu Nanyi?" Xiejin extremely doubted the authenticity of the sentence and was about to speak when Xian Yuanyao continued unhurriedly, Chu Nanyi also gave me a prescription for medicine. I grabbed the medicine and asked the maid of the Xie family to take it. After decoction, in addition to the silver needle detoxification, you also need to drink 2 decoctions a day, so that you can get quick results. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 535. Decoction. Xiejin was silent for a moment, staring at Xian Yuanyao's handsome and calm face for a moment, feeling a bad premonition slowly brewing in his heart. His hunch soon proved to be correct. Xian Yuanyao chatted with him for a while, during which he served him tea and water, took him to the toilet, washed his face and hands, and was also responsible for chatting with him, taking good care of him. However, half an hour later, when the maid came in with the decoction, Xiejin immediately frowned. The pungent smell makes people want to stay away from it. As if he couldn't see the disgusted expression on his face, Xian Yuanyao took the tray from the maid's hand, motioned for her to step back, and then sat in front of the bed with the bowl in hand. The medicine is a bit hot, Xian Yuanyao said calmly, you can drink it slowly. Xiejin stared at the bowl of medicine, frowning, as if he was worried that Xian Yuanyao might poison it. Chu Nanyi didn't say I needed to drink medicine. Really? Xian Yuanyao frowned, maybe it's because you were asleep more often and less awake, so you forgot to tell you. Today, you knew I was coming to Jinyuan to take care of you, so you told me. Xiejin said nothing, his lips tightened, and he was obviously very resistant to this bowl of soup. Xian Yuanyao stared at him suspiciously, are you afraid that I will poison you? Xiejin smiled sarcastically, how could it be possible? If Yao Yao really wants me to die, I will definitely fulfill Yao Yao's wish without hesitation. The problem is that the decoction without poison is really difficult to swallow. Xian Yuanyao's expression changed slightly, what nonsense are you talking about? I don't take medicine. Xiejin turned away, take it away. Xian Yuanyao was stunned for a moment, silently looking down at the dark soup in the bowl, and then looking up at Xiejin who was resisting. As if he thought of something, the corner of his mouth slowly raised a playful arc. Ajin, are you afraid of taking medicine? Xiejin lay down on the bed calmly, with a tired look on his face, I'm not afraid, but there's just no need to drink this kind of thing. I've never heard that people who are injured, sick or poisoned don't feel the need to take medicine. Xian Yuanyao said in a calm tone, when the Lord was injured, he drank medicine for several days. Are you more difficult to serve than the Lord? Xiejin sighed, Yao Yao, this is not a question of whether it is difficult to serve, it is really not necessary. It's not up to you to decide whether to use it or not. Xian Yuanyao seemed to have finally caught his 7 inches, with a bit of suppressed excitement in his voice. It took the maid almost an hour to fry it, and Chu Nanyi is open. This prescription is extremely expensive, don't waste your time and money. Xiejin shook his head. Xian Yuanyao seemed to be coaxing a child, you can get better faster by taking medicine. Xiejin had no intention of getting better quickly. He had already prepared to stay in bed for 2 months. At this time, it was naturally even more impossible for him to drink this bowl of bitter medicine in order to get better quickly. So he raised his hand and pulled up the quilt to cover his head, I won't drink. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment, and then his tone became calmer, Master Xieju is indeed very arrogant and difficult to serve. I don't have time to waste time with you here. Since you don't want to drink, I will have someone take it down and pour it out. After saying that, he really wanted to turn around and leave. Yao Yao. Xiejin pulled down the quilt and turned to look at him, his brows furrowed tightly, are you angry? Xian Yuanyao paused slightly, but did not turn around. He just faced him with his back, how dare I, General, vent my anger on Mr. Xieju. Xiejin looked at him without saying a word, secretly thinking that the tone of his words was obviously different, and he said he wasn't angry. It's just a bowl of soup, isn't it? He sat up resignedly and said, "I'll drink." From an angle that he couldn't see, Xian Yuanyao curled his lips successfully, then turned around and walked back to the inner room. His expression returned to calm. "Good medicine is bitter in taste and good for the disease." "Yao Yao is right." Xie Jin raised his arm, "but my hands are inconvenient. Yao Yao, feed me." Xian Yuanyao has no problem. He sat on the stool and began to feed Xie Jin the medicine with a spoon. Although just smelling the medicine, he knew how difficult it was to swallow the bowl of medicine, but after he actually took his mouth, Xie Jin was still so bitter that he wanted to cry. His face was almost wrinkled. The bitter taste fermented in your mouth, traveling down your throat and making your stomach churn. Xie Jin resisted the feeling of nausea and vomiting, and swallowed the medicine without hesitation. Bitter. Indescribable suffering. He had never drank such bitter medicine since he was a child, and he felt that his internal organs were being invaded by the bitter taste. Xian Yuanyao frowned and looked at him. Seeing that his eyebrows were wrinkled, he couldn't help but wonder, was he really such a big reaction? Although the decoction and medicine are all bitter, isn't it true that the ninth master of the Xie family is not afraid of anything? Who has never been sick or injured since childhood? If you catch a cold, you have to drink 2 patches of medicine to get better. Xian Yuanyao thought that Xie Jin was pretending to win his sympathy. After all, this guy was always used to pretending to act, so he didn't fall for it and just said lightly, "If you really can't drink it, I won't force you. After all, your body is yours and you don't take it seriously, so what do I have to worry about?" After hearing this, Xie Jin couldn't help but complain in his heart. In vain, with his exquisite heart, he carefully lured the little leopard into the love network he had set up, but he really didn't expect that he would fall into the hands of the little leopard because of a bowl of soup. "It's really bitter," Xie Jin whispered, his voice sounded pitiful. "Yao Yao, why don't you try it yourself?" Xian Yuanyao shook his head and put a spoon to his mouth. "The soup and medicine are all bitter. I know it without tasting it, but you still have to drink it." Xie Jin opened his mouth helplessly and swallowed a mouthful of medicine down his throat. The bitter taste swept through his heart again. He felt that the process that was supposed to be enjoyable had now become a torture to torture him. Xie Jin pursed his lips tightly, suppressing the overwhelming discomfort in his stomach, and directly reached out to take the medicine bowl, deciding to take a sip and die early. Xian Yuanyao raised his eyebrows and was about to praise him, but he saw Xie Jin suddenly got up from the bed, staggered out without even putting on his shoes, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Xian Yuanyao's heart sank, and he chased after him subconsciously, "A Jin." After chasing him outside Jinyuan, he saw Xie Jin lying in a small flower garden and vomiting all over the place. The sound was like he was about to vomit out his spleen and gallbladder, which was very frightening. A Jin. Xian Yuanyao walked over, ignoring the bitter and unpleasant smell emanating from the air. His eyes fell on Xie Jin's pale face, and his brows furrowed deeply. "You." Xie Jin turned to look at him when he heard the sound. His face was pale, and there was a bit of crystal water in the corners of his eyes. He looked really, seriously, glamorous and endearing. It pierced Xian Yuanyao's heart all of a sudden. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 536. The atmosphere was a little subtle. Xie Jin felt limp and uncomfortable, and said weakly, "I'm really not pretending this time." He was too sensitive to bitterness and had a low tolerance. He couldn't drink this bitter medicine since he was a child. He vomited every time he drank it, without exception. Xianyuanyao was silent for a moment, suppressed the tingling in his heart, reached out to help him up from the ground, and moved carefully, as if he was treating a weak girl. If you can't drink it, don't drink it. His voice softened unconsciously, as if he was a little apologetic. Do you feel better now? Xiejin shook his head. I feel uncomfortable. Xianyuanyao turned around and told the maid standing outside, go get a glass of water. The maid did as she was told, and soon brought a glass of warm water for Xiejin to rinse his mouth. After rinsing his mouth with a glass of water and drinking a glass of water, the bitter taste that was killing him was finally relieved. Xianyuanyao lowered his eyes and looked at Xiejin's 2 white feet. After a moment of silence, he reached out and picked him up, then turned and walked into the house. Xiejin was confused for a moment. Then he slowly raised his eyes, and reacted a little late to realize that he was actually being held in someone's arms as a little girl, and it was an extremely intimate princess hug posture. Looking at this handsome and elegant face close at hand, Xiejin lowered his eyes slightly, staring at the 2 lips with a perfect arc, and had an impulse to try. Xianyuanyao never thought that in just a short while, the poor guy who had just vomited and made people feel distressed had already made an idea in his mind that he shouldn't have made, but fortunately he walked fast and the distance was short. It only took a while to get from outside to inside. He quickly put Xiejin on the bed, and then ordered someone to bring hot water for him to soak his feet. The moment his butt sat on the edge of the bed, Xiejin's heart flashed with a sense of regret. Xianyuanyao squatted on the ground to wash his feet. For a noble prince, this was definitely the first time in his life. However, Xianyuanyao did not think much about it. He just thought that Xiejin's feet had stepped on the ground just now. In addition to being covered with dust, he was also afraid that he would catch a cold due to his weak body, so he washed him with hot water. However, Xiejin sat at the head of the bed, enjoying someone's condescending service, but he was thinking about jealous things in his heart. Did Yao Yao wash the master's feet in the past? Xianyuanyao was stunned and looked up at him with a bad expression. Why are you asking this? Curious. Of course I washed it, Xianyuanyao said in a light tone, and he didn't think it was a shameful thing. What do you think? He lost the martial arts competition in the past, and he was willing to accept the defeat and stay by the master's side as a slave, so he naturally did all kinds of work. Could it be that he still expected the master to treat him as a distinguished guest? Xiejin was speechless by his words. What do you think? He really couldn't have any opinions. After all, when Xianyuanyao followed Rongyu, they were 2 strangers. Xiejin only heard of the name of the Prince of Huainan and had never even seen him. It's just that when he thinks about it now, he feels a little sour. Can you tell me about the past? He said. Was the master good to you before? Xianyuanyao lowered his eyes and wiped his feet, saying in a leisurely tone, there's nothing good or bad. I was stubborn at the beginning, and I didn't know how high the sky was when I was young. I challenged the master and lost miserably, so I stayed with him as a slave for a year. You know the master's temper. Now he has become softer after having the queen. He was a cold-faced and ruthless evil god before. How could he be good to me? He said he was a slave for a year, and he was a slave for a year, without any discount. He served tea and water, served grinding, changed clothes and washed, and did all kinds of work. Rongyu didn't know whether he liked quietness or deliberately made fun of him, leaving him alone to serve, so Xianyuanyao was tortured to the point that he didn't dare to have any temper. Xiejin was silent for a moment, and couldn't help but sighed. It's really heartbreaking. Xianyuanyao's mouth twitched, not wanting to argue with a weak patient. My 1-year slavery was over, and the master drove me away, but I didn't agree. Xianyuanyao sighed. If I had agreed to leave directly, what would you do now? Xiejin understood what he meant after a little thought. As the Prince of Huainan, If Xian Yuanyao resolutely left after a year of slavery, he would probably have some resentment and dissatisfaction towards Rongyu in his heart, or even if he was magnanimous and didn't hold a grudge, he would definitely stay away from him in the future and never want to be involved with him again. After all, this is also a dark history. But staying is another story. Xiejin remembered that Xian Yuanyao had said before that he had been with Rongyu for 5 years. Except for the first year of slavery, the next 4 years should have been spent training with him, so strictly speaking, Xian Yuanyao's current skills and military strategies were taught by Rongyu. Although Xian Yuanyao could still learn something by following his father even if he returned to Huainan. But there is no if. The fact is that Xian Yuanyao was taught by Rongyu. During those years, from the initial disobedience to the later suppression, fear, until the final loyalty with a sincere heart, Xian Yuanyao's 5 years may have been extremely difficult and hard 5 years, but the respect that grew from the bottom of his heart during those 5 years was enough to be unforgettable and difficult to fade for a lifetime. The more Xiejin thought about it, the more he felt that the little leopard was really determined and different. After all, most teenagers are still spoiled under the protection of their parents. Few people can be tossed around by Rongyu for several years without feeling any fear or retreat, but instead have a heart of submission. Yao Yao is very powerful, Xiejin said sincerely. I admire you. Xian Yuanyao asked someone to bring the water out, and said lightly, I admire you too. Admire me? Xiejin raised his eyebrows. What do you admire about me? I admire the ability of Master Xieju to be both strong and gentle. Xian Yuanyao stood up and looked at him lightly. Master Ju was walking briskly just now, he didn't look like a weak patient at all. Xiejin's smile froze slightly. Yao Yao. I guess Master Ju doesn't need my care, he can take good care of himself. Yao Yao. Xiejin smiled apologetically. I'm really weak, wasn't that an emergency just now? People will be stimulated to have unlimited potential in times of crisis. Really? Xian Yuanyao smiled lightly. In that case, you should take 2 doses of the decoction every day, so that you can stimulate Master Ju's potential and let your body heal sooner. Xiejin's expression was completely frozen, and he couldn't say a word. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 537. Xian Yuanyao seems to be a person who is easy to fool, but when he is smart, he can make people helpless. Although he knew that Xiejin could not drink bitter medicine, Xiejin's attitude of fooling him really made him angry, so Xian Yuanyao decided to teach him a lesson, serving when he should serve, and being tough when he should be tough. Xiejin had a hard time, and it was useless to say good things. That night, because Xiejin was tossed around, Xian Yuanyao was kind and considerate. He wiped his body and tried his best to meet all of Xiejin's reasonable requirements. However, he ordered people to boil medicine early the next morning and forced Xiejin to drink the medicine. Poor FemaleLead had never been tossed around like this since he was a child, but this time he was completely defeated by Xian Yuanyao. He vomited after drinking it, but he could not resist the threat of Xian Yuanyao's light eyes, so he could only take the soup obediently. He wanted to drink it all in one gulp, but he always rushed out to vomit before drinking half a bowl because of the bitter taste. Every time he vomited until his face turned pale and he felt weak all over, his charming phoenix eyes looked at Xian Yuanyao with sparkling water, which made the little leopard feel fluttering in his heart. He felt a little pity in his heart, and then he couldn't help but want to bully him. Xian Yuanyao thought to himself, so he was so bad. However, this feeling of bullying people is really addictive, especially when the person being bullied is the 9th master of the Xie family, who is known to be unruly and feared by everyone. It's simply unstoppable. Xian Yuanyao thought secretly and felt that he was really bad. What bad idea is Yao Yao coming up with? Xiejin finally relieved the bitterness in his mouth and handed the teacup back to the maid. When he turned around, he saw Xian Yuanyao's lips raised suspiciously, and he said with a smile, "Do you like to see me in such a mess?" Xian Yuanyao's expression instantly straightened up, and he looked at him seriously. What nonsense are you talking about? Is this prince so bad? Well, he is indeed so bad. Xiejin reached out to him. Carry me in. Xian Yuan raised an eyebrow. Don't you have legs? Yao Yao carried me yesterday. Yesterday was a special case. Xiejin leaned against him and said weakly, but my legs are weak. Dujuan, go and boil the medicine. Xian Yuanyao said lightly, your son is too weak to take the medicine. The bowl of medicine just now was all vomited, and a new bowl had to be boiled. Dujuan stood in front of the door with her eyebrows lowered. She bowed when she heard the words and quickly turned around and retreated. Xiejin's body stiffened, and his voice softened unconsciously, Yao Yao. Do you still want me to hold you? Xian Yuanyao's heart trembled, and he forced himself to be calm and glanced at him. Are you still weak? Xiejin wanted to say that he was still weak, but when he thought of the bitter soup that made his heart, liver and lungs want to vomit, and Xian Yuanyao's obvious attitude of wanting to punish him at this time, his face suddenly fell, and he said pitifully, I am really weak, and the medicine is really bitter. If I vomit several more times, my life will be over. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment. Really can't drink the medicine. Xiejin was happy to see that his attitude softened, and nodded quickly, I really can't drink it? Forget it. Why should I punish him? Xian Yuanyao was soft-hearted, and he reached out to help him walk into the house. If you can't drink, then don't drink it. What are you doing? Chu Nanyi walked into Jinyuan with a medicine box, and when he looked up, he saw Xiejin leaning on Xian Yuanyao, and he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Did you just come back from a fight early in the morning? Xian Yuanyao turned his head to look at him, and without saying a word, he helped Xiejin to sit down in the inner room. Chu Nanyi followed him in, and naturally he didn't miss the strong smell of medicine outside. He understood it in his heart, and after entering the inner room, he said lightly, the ninth master of the Xie family is not afraid of anything, but he is afraid of taking medicine. I don't know if people will laugh at me if I tell others about it. Xiejin looked at him without any emotion. Although his face was pale and he didn't look very good, the power of this look could not be ignored. Since you know that Master Ju is afraid of taking medicine, why do you deliberately make trouble for me? What do you mean by deliberately making trouble for you? Chu Nanyi put down the medicine box and motioned him to lie down on the bed. Prince Yao is worried about your health and is afraid that you will not recover quickly enough, so he asked me to prescribe the medicine for you. Do you think I am willing to waste it on you? Even if it is not his money that is spent on getting the medicine, the medicinal materials are innocent and should not be wasted casually. Xian Yuanyao stood aside and listened to the conversation between the two. He thought of the 2 bowls of medicine that Xiejin vomited last night and this morning. The medicinal materials in them were not expensive for the Xie family, but they were all prices that ordinary people could not afford. What Xiejin vomited was all white silver. Thinking of this, he immediately gave up the plan to continue to get medicine tomorrow, but there was still a patch of medicine to be decocted tonight. It seemed that it should not be wasted since it had been obtained. Yao Yao Xiejin was lying on the bed, looking at Xian Yuanyao who was standing beside him. Thank you for your hard work. You can go have breakfast first, or go out for a walk, and come back after Chu Nanyi finishes the acupuncture. Xian Yuanyao glanced at him, his eyes fell on his shoulders. The clothes were half dropped from the shoulders, revealing a slender and strong arm. Although it looked white and thin, it was definitely tight and smooth with lines. Xiejin Xian Yuanyao asked inexplicably, how high is your martial arts? Xiejin raised his eyebrows and looked at him, why? Curious. Not too high, Xiejin said, I shouldn't be able to beat Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao didn't quite believe it. He felt that the reason why Xiejin could run rampant among the noble sons of the imperial family and do whatever he wanted was not just because he was the son of the prime minister. He should have strong ability and confidence, and had strong enough means to solve the troubles he caused. Although being strong does not necessarily mean having profound martial arts skills, being cunning can still make people fear him, but with Xiejin's temperament, if he is not good at martial arts, he will be punished sooner or later if he relies on guards for his own safety. Now he is lying in bed to recover from his injuries, isn't that a good proof? Thinking of this, Xian Yuanyao couldn't help wondering again. Xiejin should have a lot of guards around him. Who on earth could really hurt Xiejin, this evildoer? What is Yao Yao thinking about? Seeing Xian Yuanyao's thoughtful face, Xiejin raised his phoenix eyes slightly and spoke with interest. Are you thinking that whoever has better martial arts skills will be on top in the future? Xian Yuanyao's face turned cold and he looked at him unkindly. If you dare to talk nonsense again, I will make you drink medicine for a month. Xiejin shut up silently, but he was secretly happy in his heart. Little Leopard probably didn't realize that he would turn around and leave or threaten to leave when he was angry and embarrassed before, but now he just threatened him to drink bitter medicine? This is considered progress. Master Zhu is in good spirits today, Xian Yuanyao said lightly. When Mr. Chu gave him acupuncture, he didn't need to be so gentle, and pierced harder, using pain to stimulate his potential and help him recover. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 538. The servants of Jinyuan knew that the young prince was a distinguished guest of their own son and could not be neglected, so they cleared out the bedroom next to Xiejin early and arranged for two smart young men to take care of him. Don't ask why there is no maid, because Master Zhu doesn't allow it. Xian Yuanyao stayed until Chu Nanyi finished giving Xiejin acupuncture before leaving. Seeing the blood dripping from his fingertips into the bowl with an abnormal green-black color, he couldn't help but frown and said lightly, "When can I clean up the poison?" Chu Nanyi concentrated on giving Xiejin acupuncture without raising his head when he heard the words, "This kind of poison is very tricky. If the medicine is too strong, it will cause irreversible damage to the body. You can only do it slowly, about a month to 2 months. So long?" Xian Yuanyao's expression changed slightly. Isn't this delaying things? Before the Lord left, he handed over all the important matters in the royal study to Xiejin. If he really stayed in bed for 2 months, what would he do with the court affairs? "Yao Yao, don't worry," Xiejin comforted him, "I will go into the palace to handle court affairs when my body recovers a little. Nothing will happen." When he said this, he was still sure that everything in the court was under control. Although Xian Yuanchen would be more strenuous if he was busy with the matters in the imperial study room, in general, it would only be a few days of hard work, and nothing would happen. Things happen that are beyond your control. However, there is a saying that man's calculation is not as good as God's calculation. Xiehuhu, who is strategizing, will soon understand that even for a future minister who is said to be very thoughtful, the road to becoming a powerful minister is not smooth sailing. He needs to go through repeated training to forge powerful and more powerful skills. Mind. After getting rid of the poison, you should drink more water. The servants from Jinyuan came in to serve his young master. Xian Yuanyao and Chu Nanyi got up and walked out together. When they walked out of the gate of Jinyuan, Chu Nanyi said, "The regent asked you to concentrate on training. You have stayed directly at Xia's house for the past 2 days, are you not afraid that it will delay the progress of the military training and not be able to deliver the mission when the regent comes back?" Xian Yuanyao's expression condensed for a moment, and then he slowly shook his head. "It doesn't matter, I'll stay for a few days and then go back." He originally thought that Xiejin was really so weak that he was bedridden, but later he discovered that this guy was the best at pretending, and kept pretending to be weak by being poisoned. But now that he was here, he simply stayed to take care of him for a few days, and returned to the military camp when Xiejin could move freely. Go. Chu Nanyi's expression was gentle. Emotions and responsibilities must be clearly understood. Don't miss business because of feelings, otherwise you won't be able to bear the consequences. Xian Yuanyao's heart palpitated, and he subconsciously retorted, you were also led by Xiejin. I am just a rational and sober bystander, and I have not been led astray by anyone. Chu Nanyi said, I hope you and Xiejin can always stay rational. After saying this, he turned and left. Xian Yuanyao stood quietly in the distance, looking at his retreating figure, his eyebrows slightly furrowed, not knowing what he was thinking in his heart. He actually understood what Chu Nanyi meant. He and Xiejin are both responsible people, and they are also important ministers of the Dongling dynasty who will protect the country in the future. They are not sons of aristocratic families who can do whatever they want. No matter what attitude Xiejin has towards him, and no matter how he treats Xiejin in the future, he must not miss the point, otherwise. Xian Yuanyao did not enter Xiejin's house again, but returned to his own place. He lay on the bed with his clothes on, staring at the patterns on the tent ceiling and lost in thought. Sometimes Xiejin's monster-like face appeared in his mind, and sometimes he thought of the words he said made his thoughts confused for a moment, and he couldn't help but let out a long sigh. What a monster! I don't think about it anymore. The more I think about it, the more confused my mind becomes. Xian Yuanyao closed his eyes and forced himself to fall asleep. This is what martial arts practitioners are good at. After the whole body relaxes, it is easy to fall asleep. However, not long after he fell asleep, his nerves suddenly tightened. The door was pushed open and someone walked in. Xian Yuanyao closed his eyes and waited quietly, but his body had quietly entered a state of alert. Xiejin, who was wearing a robe, pushed open the door and walked to the bed. He stared at the sleeping young man on the bed for a while and couldn't help but mutter, why did you fall asleep without taking off your clothes? Before Xian Yuanyao heard him speak, he had already identified that the person was Xiejin from the familiar aura approaching him. At this time, he heard that he took the initiative to speak. When he was about to open his eyes and say something, Xiejin went directly to the bed, with long arms. With one stretch, he pulled his entire body into his arms. Xian Yuanyao's body suddenly stiffened, and then he subconsciously opened his eyes, turned over from the bed and sat up. What are you doing? Xiejin looked at him innocently. Yao Yao hasn't fallen asleep yet? Did I scare you when I came in? Xian Yuanyao firmly refused to admit that he was scared, and stared at him coldly. I was woken up by you even when I was sleeping. Really? Xiejin sat up and looked aggrieved, but without Yao Yao here, I feel lonely. Xian Yuanyao was suffocated and his eyes became sharper. Get out. Xiejin Danfeng raised his eyebrows. Yao Yao is afraid of me. I'm afraid of your size. Xian Yuanyao sneered coldly. You look like you can't take care of yourself. I will kill you with just a few fingers. Xiejin smiled sullenly. Yao Yao is mighty. It was obviously just a short sentence, only 4 words, but it made Xian Yuanyao feel hot on his face. He always felt that Xiejin was teasing him, and couldn't help but get angry. If you are so full that you have nothing to do, stand in the corner and walk forward. Zhamabu, Xiejin was stunned. My current physical strength dash. You are in very good physical condition now. Xian Yuanyao interrupted him ruthlessly. Are you going? Xiejin still wanted to struggle to the death. Yao Yao. Xian Yuanyao had a cold face. Brother Yao. Xian Yuanyao's scalp went numb and he glared at him fiercely. Either go to Zumabu, or go back to your room. Xiejin wanted to say that he didn't come here just to do the horse stance. That is what novice martial artists need to do to practice basic skills. What kind of horse stance is he doing? However, when he met Xian Yuanyao's resolute eyes, he sighed softly, baby. Xiejin, Xian Yuanyao frowned and raised his hand to cover his mouth. Can you stop being so evil dash? His palm felt warm and numb, and Xiejin actually grabbed his hand and kissed it. Xian Yuanyao hurriedly retracted his hand as if he had been burned, his handsome face flushed. Xiejin. Sorry, Xiejin looked ashamed, I didn't mean to tease Yao Yao dash. Get out. Embarrassment and anger rushed directly to the top of his head. Xian Yuanyao picked up the pillow and threw it at him. Xiejin, get out of here. Get away. Get out. It's over. It really made the little leopard anxious. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 539. Seeing that Xian Yuanyao was so angry that smoke was rising from his head and was already on the verge of losing control and going berserk, Xiejin slowly put the pillow back to its original position, pursed his lips, and glanced at Xian Yuanyao silently. He looked like he had made a mistake and then turned around and walked to the corner without saying a word. He took up the horse stance seriously. Xian Yuanyao stared at his back, his expression frozen at that moment. In order to show his sincerity, Xiejin faced the wall directly, leaving only his back to Xian Yuanyao and avoiding the embarrassment of the little leopard meeting his eyes. After all, the little leopard is quite thin-skinned. The atmosphere in the room was particularly delicate for a moment, and an awkward and slightly annoyed atmosphere filled the room. Xian Yuanyao stared at him expressionlessly for a long time. In addition to his delicate and noble face, and his pair of pink and phoenix eyes that fascinated thousands of girls, the ninth master of the Xie family also had a particularly good figure. Xian Yuanyao's handsome face darkened slightly, his eyes fell on his thin waist and his buttocks that were even more upright due to squatting down, and he didn't say anything for a while. Yao Yao, go to sleep, Xiejin whispered, with a caring tone, I promise not to disturb you again. Xian Yuanyao came back to his senses, looked away from the smooth waist, stared at the back of his head for a while, and snorted coldly, obviously not believing his promise. I promise. Xiejin raised his hand and swore, if I bother Yao Yao again, I will let Yao Yao ignore me from now on. Xian Yuanyao said nothing. He just sat on the bed and watched without saying a word. He saw that Xiejin had really entered the state of Zhamabu. The heat on his face slowly faded away. He wanted to leave, but he was afraid that this guy would do something else. The moth came out, and besides, he had not left just now, and it seemed a bit pretentious to leave now. However, I was still a little angry. Xian Yuanyao clenched his hands, wishing he could go up and kick Xiejin into the wall and hang him there. Yao Yao. Xiejin didn't hear what he said and couldn't help but speak again, you go to sleep first dash. Shut up, Xian Yuanyao said indifferently, try saying one more word. Xiejin's voice stopped and he finally became completely quiet. Xian Yuanyao lay back on the bed, pulled up the quilt and covered his head to sleep. Out of sight, out of mind. Otherwise he will be pissed off sooner or later. Time passed little by little. Xiejin's horse stance is naturally very stable. It is a piece of cake for any martial arts master. Moreover, this is the family method given to him by Yao Yao, so he must implement it to the end. There was no sound in his ears, and his keen senses detected the movement of the young man on the bed. From the steady to undetectable breathing, it could be heard that his anger had obviously dissipated and he fell asleep again. Xiejin quietly turned his head and glanced at the person sleeping on the bed covered with a quilt. The corners of his lips curled up slightly, and he felt calm in his heart. Little leopard actually has him in his heart. Otherwise, how could he just be angry but not have the heart to attack him? Anyway, if this matter came to Xiejin, and someone dared to tease him like this without his consent, he would definitely have their hands and feet cut off, except for the person he liked. So he can conclude that little leopard has him in his heart. It's just that I don't want to admit it yet. Thinking of this, Xiejin couldn't help but feel happy. He had already begun to long for a bright future in which the two of them would soon achieve perfection. Just as he said to Chu Nanyi that day, they would fight side by side in the court, drinking and chatting over tea and playing chess in their free time. Everyone would share their joys and worries. You won't feel alone when you look at the spring flowers and autumn moon. That's enough. Although wishes are good, accidents always happen in reality. Before he could completely overcome the little leopard's defenses, a big event suddenly happened in the palace, a very serious event. There was an assassin in the imperial study room, and Xian Yuanchen and the eunuch Zhang Yin were assassinated and injured. The most important thing is that the imperial seal has been lost. The news of the accident reached the Dajhan palace and the Xie family almost at the same time. When the eldest princess and Chu Hong'ai heard the news, their expressions changed at the same time. The imperial study was attacked by an assassin. When Xian Yuanyao heard the news, he immediately fell out of bed. The jade seal was stolen. Xie Zhuyi, who had never changed his expression even when the sky fell, finally realized the seriousness of the matter. His handsome face was covered with frost, and he asked coldly, "How many people know about this matter?" The person who reported the news was Yang Baokeng, the commander of the Imperial Guard. He knew that this matter was not only about the country, but also about his own head, so he kept his mouth tight. "Right now, only I, Mr. Xian Yuan and the Palm eunuch know about it." After a pause, his eyes glanced at Xian Yuanyao who came out of the inner room, and he added, "Prince Yao also knows." At this moment, he was full of anxiety and obviously had no intention of wondering why Xian Yuanyao appeared in Xie family Jinyuan. He only knew that the loss of the jade seal would most likely put his life in danger, so his face was extremely pale and ugly. Xie Jin looked up at him. "The eldest princess doesn't know either." "I sent someone to report the assassination of the eldest princess, Master Xian Yuan, but I didn't say anything about the loss of the jade seal," Commander Yang said in a low voice. "When I came in just now, I screened away the people here, for fear of accidentally letting the news slip, and I asked Master Zhu forgive me. He is the commander of the Imperial Guards, and there is no need to be too respectful in front of Xie Jin, a fifth-level political participant. However, Xie Jin is a confidant of the regent who is accompanying the imperial study, so Xie Jin has a heavy responsibility for the loss of the jade seal, and he must know. Even if I can hide it from Xie Chief Fu and Prime Minister Liu, I can't hide it from Xie Jin." Xie Jin's eyebrows were deep, and even though his face was still a little pale, he couldn't hide the coldness and sharpness that suddenly returned to the corners of his eyes. "This matter must not be spread." Commander Yang said, "I know. Before the regent and his majesty come back, the jade seal must be found," Xie Jin said coldly. "Investigate in secret, and don't make it public. If the news leaks out, I'm afraid you can't bear the consequences." Commander Yang's face changed slightly. "I hope you will take more care." Xie Jin certainly has to take care. The loss of the jade seal is a serious matter. Not to mention that Commander Yang can't afford it. If he really can't find it back, he, the confidant in front of the regent, will lose a layer of skin. Xie Jin quickly changed his clothes and went into the palace with Commander Yang. "I'll go to," Xian Yuanyao said silently, "see if there's anything I can help with. If not, let the Black Obsidian Army find it." "I don't believe we can't find it even if we turn the imperial city upside down." "Nonsense," Xie Jin frowned. "If a general mobilizes troops without permission, it can be considered treason. Do you want to bring King Huainan back to the imperial capital to be punished?" Xian Yuanyao was speechless for a moment. Although he couldn't mobilize troops, Xian Yuanyao still went into the palace with Xie Jin. Along the way, he looked as gloomy as water, and he seemed to have regained his former sinister and terrifying image of Master Xieju, which made people feel unreasonably palpitating. Xian Yuanyao was silent for a moment. "Don't worry, the Lord made careful arrangements for the defense of the palace before leaving. Although the incident in the imperial study was beyond our expectations, there should be traces to follow, and it may not be difficult to investigate." Warm Ti. The regent is a yandere who needs to be pampered. Author, Nan Huang. Chapter 540. Xiejin said nothing. He knew that Xian Yuanyao was right. Before Rong Yu left, he made the most thorough arrangements for the palace guards. Although heavy troops were placed in the Dajhan Palace to protect the young prince, other important military locations were not neglected at all. No matter how powerful a martial arts master is, it is not easy to break through the heavy defenses and enter the imperial study room to assassinate and steal. Xiejin's mind turned several times in an instant, thinking of several possibilities. But it's all just speculation for now. After entering the palace, the three of them went straight to the imperial study. After seeing the situation in the imperial study room, Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao realized how euphemistic Commander Yang's report was. The palm print eunuch was seriously injured in the assassination and fell into a coma. Xian Yuanchen had been slashed with a sword on his arm and shoulder, and his clothes had been torn blood-stained red. Outside the imperial study room lay the corpses of several guards. The situation was much more serious than he let on. The cold expression on Xiejin's face became darker as he and Xian Yuanyao stepped into the imperial study. The eldest princess and Xie Xiaofu stood aside and watched without saying a word as several imperial doctors treated the injuries of Xian Yuanchen and the palm print eunuch. Both of them were unconscious at the moment, and they had to wait until they woke up to ask anything they wanted to ask. "Your Highness," Princess Xiejin spoke and bowed, "Father." Xian Yuan 11 turned around and saw Xiejin and Xian Yuanyao coming in together, and frowned slightly. "Have you also received the news?" When she asked this question, her eyes fell more on Xian Yuanyao's face, obviously wondering how Xian Yuanyao, who was supposed to be staying in the military camp, came to the palace with Xiejin by such a coincidence. She knew that Xiejin was assassinated some time ago and was staying at home to recuperate. So at this moment she had no intention of raising an army to accuse him. She just frowned and said, "Does the assassin want to kill the regent?" "It's hard to say for the time being," Xiejin said indifferently. "Although the regent's departure from Dongling is not a secret, the people who know about it are the high-ranking ministers. If they are assassins from outside, they probably don't know the news. Unless a minister goes out to publicize the fact that the regent and Her Majesty the Queen are not in the palace. However, the absence of the king of a country in the palace is a major event that cannot be ignored. The people in the palace and ministers have no time to conceal it, so how can they go out to publicize it? Unless you have bad intentions or have a bad mind. Separated by such a large palace and numerous palace walls, the news inside the palace could not be revealed easily. Moreover, both Xie Chief Assistant and Prime Minister Liu had warned the ministers. Therefore, it would be wrong to say that the assassin did not know that the regent was not around and sneaked into the royal study to assassinate the regent. It's not unreasonable. But Xiejin knew full well that the assassin was definitely not targeting the regent. On the contrary, the assassin probably knew that the regent was not here, so he dared to break in. As for whether the theft of the jade seal was done smoothly or deliberately, it still needs to be investigated further. With his thoughts racing, Xiejin said calmly, "Father, what do you think? The imperial study seems to be within your scope of responsibility." Xie Xiaofu glanced at him, and there was no emotion in his tone. "Have you done well what the regent told you before he left? The imperial study was infiltrated by an assassin today. Is there anyone dead? It is an unforgivable offense and provocation to the majesty of the royal family. How do you plan to investigate this case?" When the eldest princess heard this, she glanced at Xie Xiaofu in surprise. It has been heard that the head of the Xie family loves his only legitimate son like a jewel. What happened today? He actually did not explain a word for his son's dereliction of duty, and had no intention of exonerating him. Instead, he asked him to bear all the responsibility. Down. "It was my son's dereliction of duty." Xiejin bowed slightly. "My son will find out the identity of the assassin as soon as possible and bring him to justice." Xie Xiaofu asked, "How long is the shortest time?" Xian Yuanyao thought of Xiejin's body that had not yet recovered, and frowned slightly. Master Xie. 7 days, Xiejin said calmly. Within 7 days, my son will definitely find out the truth. The eldest princess listened to the conversation between father and son without saying a word, and secretly said that Xie Xiaofu was worthy of being Xie Xiaofu. He doted on his son but did not indulge him, and was arrogant but not indulgent. No wonder Xiejin has been pampered like jewels over the years but has not raised him yet. He became a playboy, but he was extremely talented and won the title of #1 scholar in one fell swoop. The Xie family has a good family tradition and upbringing. Commander Yang. Xie Xiaofu turned around and looked at Commander Yang, who was standing aside without daring to speak. You and Xiejin should investigate this matter together. 7 days is neither long nor short. It should be enough for you. Commander Yang lowered his eyebrows and said, I know this from my humble position. The meaning of Xie Xiaofu's words is very obvious. If nothing is found out within 7 days, it will not just be as simple as dereliction of duty. Coupled with the incompetence in doing things, at least he and Xiejin will be dismissed at the same time, at worst. Thinking of the jade seal lost in the royal study, a heavy stone weighed on Commander Yang's heart. Before the return of the Prince Regent and Her Majesty the Queen, if he could not find the jade seal, he might even lose his life. Your Highness, the eldest Princess Xie Xiaofu turned to look at Xianyuan 11, Dajhan Palace officials will send more people to add more defenses. No need to bother. Xianyuan 11 smiled faintly. I don't know how well the Imperial Study Room is defended, but the Dajhan Palace is impregnable. No one can easily take a step forward. Please rest assured, Chief Minister Xie. Hearing this, Xie Xiaofu nodded slowly. The regent's arrangements must be appropriate. Xian Yuanyao fixed his eyes on the injured palm print eunuch and saw that there were blood stains everywhere on his body, and the blood quickly solidified on his clothes after flowing out. It looked really unusual. He frowned. How is the injury of the palm print eunuch? A doctor treated the wound and replied, it's not very good. He hasn't died yet, but I don't know if he can make it tonight. Xian Yuanyao's heart sank. What if he can't make it? If he can't make it, he may not wake up. Xian Yuanyao's face changed slightly, and he turned to look at Xiejin. At the time of the incident, only the eunuch in charge of the seal and Xian Yuanchen were in the imperial study. They were the only ones who were most likely to have seen the assassin's true face. If they couldn't wake up, there would be no clues in the case. How is Xian Yuanchen injured? Mr. Chen's injury is not serious, but it's strange. He has the same symptoms as the seal-holding eunuch. The imperial physician stared at the wounds on Xian Yuanchen's arms and shoulders. The blood is a normal red color, not like poisoning, but under normal circumstances, the blood will cool down before slowly drying up, but the blood coagulated as soon as it flowed out, indicating that the blood is abnormal. Xiejin's eyebrows were cold and sharp. Someone come. Commander Yang was about to speak, but saw a man in black rushing in. He knelt on one knee when he entered the imperial study. He was not a guard, but a man Commander Yang had never seen before, exuding a cold and sharp aura. Ask Chu Nanyi over, Xiejin ordered, immediately. Yes. Window. Tabula equals window. Tabula. Tabula.push, mode, thumbs feed -01, container, tabula below article thumbnail -300x250, placement, below article thumbnail -300x250, target. Type, mix.